You think you can outsmart me? You're just a black kid walking down the street. What makes you think you matter? Those words hit Jamal like a punch to the gut. The world felt like it stopped. The streets of Brooklyn, the hum of the city, the sounds of passing cars and chatter from the corner store all blurred into one indistinct noise as Officer Thomas stepped closer. His hand was already hovering near his holster, a silent threat that hung heavy in the air. Jamal hadn't done anything wrong. Nothing at all. He was just a 17-year-old black kid walking home from school, minding his own business, when out of nowhere, the patrol car screeched to a halt beside him. For a split second, Jamal thought about running. He knew the stories. He had seen the headlines. The way the system treated people like him. The way an officer could turn a normal day into a nightmare with just a few harsh words. But Jamal had promised himself, he wasn't going to be scared anymore. He wasn't going to run. Not this time. He looked Officer Thomas in the eye, feeling the weight of the officer's gaze on him. It was cold, calculating. The officer's eyes scanned him like he was a piece of livestock being evaluated, something to be controlled, something to be moved around. Jamal wasn't a person in the eyes of Officer Thomas. He was a problem. A threat. "Where do you think you're going, kid?" Officer Thomas asked, his voice laced with authority and disdain. Jamal didn't flinch. He knew what this was about. It wasn't about where he was going. It wasn't about what he was doing. It was about who he was. A black teenager in a city that had a long history of profiling, arresting, and mistreating people like him. It was the way the system worked. "I'm just going home," Jamal replied, his voice steady, but his heart was thumping in his chest. He kept his hands visible at his sides, trying to show the officer he wasn't a threat. "Really?" Officer Thomas took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "You think I'm just going to let you walk away without a little chat? You look like trouble." The words felt like a slap. He had heard them before, and each time they dug deeper into his soul. Trouble. Just because he existed. Just because of the color of his skin. "I'm not causing any trouble," Jamal said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm just walking home. That's it." "Is that so?" Officer Thomas narrowed his eyes, looking Jamal up and down as if he was searching for something to pin on him. Jamal could feel the officer's suspicion, like a palpable weight in the air. It was the kind of weight that made it hard to breathe, that made him feel like he was walking on thin ice, waiting for it to crack beneath him. "Empty your pockets," Officer Thomas ordered, his voice cold and firm. Jamal's heart skipped a beat. His palms began to sweat. He hadn't done anything. He had nothing to hide. But he knew that didn't matter. To Officer Thomas, Jamal was already guilty. He always was. He reached into his pocket slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. He pulled out his phone, his wallet, a few crumpled bills. Everything was clean, everything was normal. He held the items out in front of him, but the officer wasn't satisfied. "Nothing suspicious," Jamal said, trying to keep his voice steady, but the anger began to rise in his chest. The injustice of it all, the way people like him were treated just for existing, was enough to make his blood boil. Officer Thomas stepped closer, his boots scraping against the pavement. "You think I don't see it?" The officer's voice dropped, a menacing whisper. "You're all the same. Always thinking you can get away with something. But not today, kid. Not today." Jamal's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. He knew what came next. He had seen it in the news, heard about it from his older brother, his friends. The cops could turn on you in an instant. They could escalate things for no reason just because they felt like it. His throat tightened, but he refused to let the fear show. He wasn't going to back down. Not this time. He wasn't going to be afraid of Officer Thomas. He wasn't going to let this moment define him. "I'm not doing anything wrong," Jamal said, his voice firm, his fists clenched at his sides. "I'm just trying to get home. I haven't done anything wrong." Officer Thomas's eyes narrowed, and for a second, Jamal thought he saw a flicker of doubt in the officer's gaze. But it quickly disappeared, replaced by the same cold, calculating look. "You think you can talk your way out of this?" Officer Thomas scoffed. "You're just another black kid trying to get away with something. You're nothing but trouble." Jamal's chest tightened. The officer's words were like a weight on his shoulders. They were the same words he had heard his whole life. The same words that told him he wasn't good enough. That told him he didn't belong. He took a deep breath. His mind was racing, but he knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to let this officer walk all over him. He wasn't going to let the system win. "I'm not a criminal," Jamal said, his voice shaking now, but not with fear. With something else. Something that burned deep in his chest. "I'm not just a black kid. I'm a person. I have the right to walk down this street. I'm not doing anything wrong. Officer Thomas's expression twisted, and for a moment, Jamal thought the officer might snap. His hand moved toward his holster, but something stopped him. The air between them crackled with tension. Jamal could feel the officer's anger radiating off him like heat from an open flame. Officer Thomas stepped closer, his face inches from Jamal's. It was then that Jamal heard the sound of another vehicle pulling up behind them. The screech of tires, the sound of a car door opening, followed by the heavy thud of boots on the pavement. Jamal didn't know who it was. But he knew one thing. He had a feeling that today something was about to change. Jamal's heart pounded as Officer Thomas moved even closer. His fists were clenched at his sides, but his body stood still. He was at a crossroads. He could back down, remain silent, and accept the fate that had been handed to him so many times before. Or he could do something he had never done. He could stand tall and refuse to let this officer's words define him. He had been angry before, sure, but never like this. The anger that was rising now wasn't just for him, it was for his family, his friends, every black person who had ever been treated like a criminal just because of their skin color. It was the weight of history, the weight of generations of injustice. The time for being silent was over. "You're wrong," Jamal said, his voice trembling with emotion but firm, carrying the weight of a truth he'd never been able to speak before. "I'm not your stereotype. I'm not just another black kid. I'm not what you want to believe I am. I'm not going to let you define me." Officer Thomas froze, his face hardening as he processed Jamal's words. For the first time, there was a crack in his stoic expression. Jamal could see it. Just for a split second the officer faltered. Jamal's words had made him question something. Maybe he wasn't so sure of himself after all. But the moment didn't last long. Officer Thomas's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing with growing frustration. "You think you can talk your way out of this? I'm giving you one last chance, kid. Empty your pockets or I'll have to arrest you." The weight of the officer's words hit Jamal like a punch. Arrest. It wasn't just an idle threat. Jamal knew exactly what that meant for him. A record. A fight for his freedom. He had seen how quickly an interaction with the police could spiral out of control. A wrong move, a wrong word, and everything could change. But Jamal wasn't going to back down. Not this time. He stepped back, his body moving instinctively as he lifted his hands, palms facing the officer. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of his frustration. "I don't need to empty my pockets. I've done nothing wrong." Officer Thomas's eyes flickered with anger, his hand gripping the edge of his belt. Jamal could see the officer's fingers twitch, the tension in the air thickening with every passing second. The officer's breath came in short, angry bursts as he glared at Jamal, sizing him up, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But just as the officer seemed ready to escalate things, Jamal heard a car door slam shut behind him. The sound was sharp and jarring, breaking the oppressive silence between them. Jamal didn't have to turn around to know who it was. He could feel the shift in the air, the way the officer's posture changed. Someone else was here. Officer Davis had arrived. Jamal didn't know much about her, but he had seen her around the precinct before. Unlike Officer Thomas, she had always seemed more level-headed, more willing to listen to people. She wasn't known for the kind of aggressive behavior that Officer Thomas displayed, and Jamal couldn't help but feel a slight sense of relief at the sight of her. Maybe, just maybe, things would be different now. Officer Davis walked toward them, her gaze quickly scanning the scene. She looked from Jamal to Officer Thomas, and for a moment she said nothing. It was as if she was sizing up the situation, assessing what had led to this confrontation. "Thomas," she finally said, her voice firm but calm. "Step aside." For a brief moment, Officer Thomas didn't respond. He stood there, jaw clenched, clearly taken aback by her interruption. But then he glared at Jamal one more time, and without saying another word, he stepped back, allowing Officer Davis to take charge. "Jamal, is it?" Officer Davis asked, her eyes softening as she focused on him. "You've done nothing wrong. You can go." Jamal's mind raced as Officer Thomas stepped back, but he didn't take his eyes off Officer Davis. This wasn't over. Not yet. He had been through this before, seen someone step in only for things to get worse. "I'm not leaving," Jamal said, his voice shaky but determined. "Not until I'm sure he's not going to keep harassing me." Officer Davis nodded, her expression softening even more. She took a step closer to Jamal, her voice lowering in reassurance. "I'm not going to let him. But I need you to trust me. Please." Jamal felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. He hadn't expected Officer Davis to step in and defend him. But there was a sense of authority about her that made him believe that she might just be the one person who could make things right. Officer Thomas stood a few feet away, his arms crossed and his face still twisted with anger. Jamal could feel the tension in the air, the way the officer's gaze burned into him. Officer Davis didn't seem bothered by it. She stood with a quiet confidence, her eyes never leaving Jamal as she spoke. "You're right, Jamal," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You haven't done anything wrong. You have every right to be here." Jamal let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was being judged. He wasn't just another black kid who had to fight for his right to exist. Officer Davis had seen him. She understood. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," Officer Davis continued. "But it's over now. You're free to go." Jamal's mind spun as he processed her words. Was this really happening? Was this really the end? It was hard to believe after everything he had been through. The stories, the headlines, the countless times his friends and family had been pulled over or wrongfully accused. Could it really be this simple? And yet, something about Officer Davis's presence made him believe it was. But just as he turned to walk away, Jamal heard a voice behind him, one that made his heart drop. It was Officer Thomas. His voice was low, seething with rage. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he sneered. "You think you're above the law?" Jamal froze in his tracks. His blood ran cold. The calm he had just felt evaporated in an instant. This wasn't over. It wasn't over by a long shot. Officer Thomas took a step forward, his hand resting on his baton. His eyes locked onto Jamal with a look that sent a chill down his spine. "Get back here," Officer Thomas growled. "You're not going anywhere." Jamal turned slowly, his heart racing. He couldn't move. He didn't know what to do. But just as Officer Thomas took another step toward him, Officer Davis stepped between them, her body blocking Jamal from the officer's advancing stance. "Enough," Officer Davis said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. "Thomas, I told you to step aside. Don't make me escalate this further." For the first time in what felt like forever, Jamal felt a flicker of hope. Officer Thomas's posture faltered, but there was still a dangerous look in his eyes. He wasn't ready to let this go. He wasn't ready to back down. And then, just as Officer Thomas opened his mouth to speak, the unexpected happened. A car pulled up behind them, and the sound of its engine cut through the air like a sudden storm. It was a moment that could change everything. The engine of the car cut through the thick tension that had settled like a cloud over the street. Jamal's heart skipped a beat as he turned, his mind racing. He couldn't make out the car's make or model, but he could hear the tires rolling over the pavement, the screech of them coming to a halt. It was a sound he knew well, one that typically meant trouble. Officer Thomas looked over his shoulder at the car. His stance stiffened, and his eyes darted between Officer Davis and the vehicle. Jamal took a hesitant step backward, his heart beating louder in his chest. Officer Thomas was still angry, still unpredictable. If things had escalated this far, how much worse could they get? As the car door opened, Jamal's breath caught. He couldn't believe his eyes. A tall, imposing figure stepped out. It wasn't another officer. It was someone he recognized. His heart sank, and for a moment, everything felt surreal. It was Lieutenant Jameson, a man Jamal had seen around the precinct on several occasions. He had always carried himself with an air of authority, no nonsense, always in control. But now, seeing him step out of the car, Jamal had a bad feeling in his gut. Lieutenant Jameson's eyes immediately locked onto Officer Thomas. His face, usually so composed, now showed the slightest hint of frustration. He took a few steps toward them, his presence alone making Jamal feel small. He had the kind of authority that commanded attention, but something about this moment felt off. "Thomas," Lieutenant Jameson said, his voice low but firm. "What's going on here?" Officer Thomas opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He glanced over at Officer Davis, and Jamal could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. For the first time, Officer Thomas didn't seem so confident. The officer had been cornered, and he knew it. "We have a situation here, sir," Officer Thomas stammered. "This kid," he gestured toward Jamal, but Officer Davis cut him off before he could finish. "He hasn't done anything wrong, Lieutenant," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of frustration. "You're wasting your time." Lieutenant Jameson turned to face Jamal. The weight of his gaze felt like 1,000 pounds pressing down on Jamal's shoulders. It was the look of someone who held the power to make decisions that could change a life in an instant. For a moment, the world felt like it had frozen. The street, the officers, the cars, it all blurred. Jamal couldn't speak, couldn't move. He was trapped in the silence of the moment, waiting for the storm to break. He had been through so much already. He had already been made to feel small, to feel like his life didn't matter. But this time he wasn't going to back down. The seconds stretched out, and then Lieutenant Jameson did something unexpected. "You're free to go," he said, his voice clear and commanding. "This is over." Jamal's breath caught. He had been waiting for the inevitable, waiting for the officer to twist the story to make him the villain. But instead, Lieutenant Jameson had stepped in. And for the first time in Jamal's life, someone with real power had made a choice that sided with him, with the truth. Jamal stood still, trying to process what had just happened. He had expected this confrontation to end in a different way. He had been ready for more. Ready for the usual, being told he didn't belong, being treated like a criminal when he hadn't done a thing wrong. But this time was different. For once, someone had chosen to do the right thing. Lieutenant Jameson hadn't just stopped the escalation. He had made a decision that forced everyone to look at the situation for what it was: a mistake. A misunderstanding that had gone too far. Jamal felt the weight in his chest lift as he realized that this was a victory. Not just for him, but for everyone who had been unfairly targeted. For all those who had been silenced or dismissed. He had stood his ground. He had faced down the system, and for once, the system had listened. It wasn't just about this one moment. It was about everything that had led up to it, the countless times people like him had been wronged, the injustices that had built up and seemed insurmountable. Today, Jamal had won a small battle. But it was a victory that mattered. "Thank you," Jamal whispered to Officer Davis, his voice filled with gratitude. She had been the one to step in when no one else would. She had been the one to make sure he wasn't left out in the cold. Officer Davis gave him a small, reassuring nod. "It's not over yet, Jamal. But today you've made your stand." As Jamal turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed a turning point. This moment was more than just a small victory, it was a symbol of hope, of change. He didn't know what the future held, but for once he felt like the system wasn't as powerful as it once seemed. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to make it right. Jamal's story wasn't just his own, it was the story of so many who had faced injustice, racism, and discrimination. It was the story of those who were told they didn't belong, that they weren't enough. But it was also a story of standing up, of finding the courage to face adversity head-on, no matter how powerful the forces against you seemed. In that moment, Jamal learned something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. You are not defined by the mistakes others make about you. You are not your label. You are not the stereotype they try to place on you. You are more than that. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fair. And it wasn't perfect. But Jamal knew this. Sometimes you have to make your own justice. Sometimes it's not about waiting for the system to fix itself. It's about standing up and demanding what's right. Have you ever been unfairly judged or misunderstood? What did you do in that moment? How did it feel to stand up for yourself, knowing the stakes were high? If you believe in standing up for justice, in fighting for what's right no matter the odds, then subscribe to Racism Exposed. Join us as we continue to expose the truth, share the untold stories, and shine a light on the battles that are often hidden in the dark. Together we can keep pushing for change, one story at a time.